Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington Realtors Legal Hotline lawyer. In this video, we are going to answer the question that asks, is it lawful for seller to require buyer to pre-qualify with seller's preferred lender? And the answer, without any other facts being involved yet, is yes, that is lawful. Here's the specific question, and I'm going to put this in the context of how the seller and the listing broker might be feeling about this issue. Buyer is presented an offer to purchase seller's property, including a financing contingency. And what that offer is really saying to the seller is, hey, seller, I want to buy your property, but I have no idea if I can afford it. I have no idea if I can actually get the financing that I need in order to be able to put the purchase price on the closing table in exchange for the deed to your property. And so, seller, I'm asking for you to give me 30 days, 45 days, whatever it might be, to go out and answer that question for myself. Can I actually afford to purchase seller's property? And in the meantime, seller, it would be awesome if you would just take your property off the market, don't let anybody else buy it, while I go answer that question, and then I'll give you an answer. Now, when you put it in that context, because that's really what's happening when a buyer includes a financing contingency, it feels a little different than how most buyers and buyer brokers feel about a financing contingency. Most buyers and buyer brokers feel like every transaction, at least nearly every transaction, has a financing contingency because there are so many opportunities for the wheels to come off of that financing bus for buyer between loan application and closing. Buyer can lose their job, interest rates could change, there could be something on buyer's credit report that they're not familiar with that could come up and derail the whole effort. From buyer's mindset, the contingency is just a normal part of any transaction that almost every single buyer is going to need. Two very different mindsets, and they both certainly are anchored in the truth and in reality, but each perspective is very different. So this question says, from seller's perspective, since you are asking me to take my property off the market for 30 days, let's say, while you go out and decide whether or not you are able to purchase my property, I need some greater assurance up front. Yes, I've read this letter from your lender, and the letter may or may not be of high quality. What background work has the lender done for this particular buyer? Is it a pre-qualification letter versus an underwriting pre-approval letter? There's a huge spectrum in between of what the letter could indicate as the amount of work that the lender has already done to verify the ability of this buyer. But in any event, the seller says, hey, buyer, you want me to take my house off the market betting on the strength of your ability to purchase, and all I've got in that regard is a piece of paper authored by a lender I've never met. And I don't trust that lender, not because I think that the lender is being deceitful, but because I have no background to trust that lender. And so, buyer, here's what I require of you. If you want a financing contingency, then you have to be pre-approved with a lender I do know and I do trust. And very oftentimes, this is going to be a lender that the listing broker has recommended to the seller as a lender that the listing broker trusts, because unless we've got a professional seller, maybe a builder, they don't have personal experience with lenders. And so it may be the listing broker who's made a recommendation of a reliable lender. And the question does not ask, and this is a very important distinction, the question does not ask, is it okay for the seller to require the buyer to use the seller's preferred lender? That would be a different question to answer. And we're not answering that question in this video because it's a far more difficult question to answer. This question is asking, is it merely okay, or let me back up differently, is it okay to merely require that the buyer get pre-approved by the seller's preferred lender before the seller grants the buyer a financing contingency? And the answer is an unqualified yes. The seller is not requiring the buyer to spend any funds to purchase any services from the seller's preferred lender. Rather, the seller is requiring the buyer to go have a conversation with the lender, Provide the lender with any documentation the lender says is important in order for the lender to evaluate this question. And then for the lender to be able to advise the seller, yes, this buyer is likely to be able to close this transaction, or no, this buyer is the buyer is not likely to be able to close the transaction. That is what is at stake in the question of, can seller require buyer to be qualified by seller's preferred lender? If you have questions on this topic or any other, please ask them by visiting warealtor.org and following the links to the legal hotline. Thank you for being a Washington Realtors member.